Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is Wednesday, August 3rd, 2011, and this is Day 9 Daily, number 334, Part 2. I said 3 right before I went live, but if you're watching on the archives, you don't know what went wrong. But of course, all the live viewers are like, Day 9 doesn't get how to speak English. But we're going to go ahead and try to do a little English speaking anyways, as we go into this game from the Protoss point of view. In Part 1, we blasted through Game 1 between oGsMC and TSL Puma from the North American Star League semifinals, or excuse me, grand finals. And I think that in terms of my own analysis of that, or my own analysis in a half and half format, I think that I did Part 1 a little bit too long. I mean, in terms of making a show, it worked out okay. I mean, I maybe did it for like 15 minutes, just did the intro and then sort of blasted through the game. But I think it's very important, if you're going to be doing an analysis in this format, to go through the game a little quicker to make sure that only the big, thick questions are floating in your head. You don't want to be prepared to look for some little detail and end up skipping ahead. So we'll kind of see what I'm talking about in this game. GGGL, boy. GGGL Obama. Yes. So what I want to do now is just sort of briefly go through the game and try to see about the big questions I asked myself as they relate to the opening build order and to everything that's going on right now. What are some big things that we looked at in Part 1? Well, hell, oGsMC went Phoenix. That was a big question I asked. oGsMC was getting all the usual upgrades, but I was asking, when was his plan to attack? Also asking things like, why did this big attack up here occur? Did the Colossi get up too late? Those seem like enough questions to ask ourselves in oGsMC's position. And what I don't want is to say something like, you know, how many chrono boosts did he spend on his +1 armor upgrade? That's something I really don't want to be doing when I'm in my first run-through analysis. Now that I'm in my second run-through and I'm looking at oGsMC pretty closely, I want to begin doing the same technique that we learned yesterday, which is to cross build orders off rather than trying to pin our opponent on a single build order. For instance, if we were able to steal this gas, we would say, no fast cloaked Banshee. We would not say something like, oh, if I steal his gas, then he must be going for an early expand or Big Marine Marauder style. You don't want to make that mistake early on. So we do see one Zealot coming out. This feels perhaps a little bit significant to me because, you know, we generally see players getting this Zealot out a smidge earlier by skipping this Gas Geyser or something along those lines. Does he even kill this probe off? I'm trying to remember that. I think he might. Oh! Uh-oh. Right batchaka. Right batchaka, dog. Yeah, sentences ain't flowing too freely today. So at this point, nothing too noteworthy has occurred. Well, interestingly, if our opponent did send his first Marine up here, I'm thinking of a lot of build orders that involve you needing that one Marine for defense. Like if he goes for a really fast reactor on a barracks and then gets a second barracks, we could actually probably punish his front pretty severely by this little push. Doing a good little bit of scouting. This is going to be the lineup with this attack. If we push up to the top and we can see a very few Marines, then we can encourage ourselves to push with these. Yeah, I know there's a factory here, but I'm just going to ignore it because I think that the scouting aspect is so important. They're able to step up here, see a tech lab with these Marines, because this is a lot of information as far as I'm concerned. Let's think about the situation we're in right now. We are the Protoss player. We had a Marine sneak into our base early. His front might be vulnerable. Then we see this freaking factory float in here. When I see the factory, I'm going to be thinking to myself, well, why would he rush to float a factory in my base unless he was getting a starport? Right? I can immediately cross things off like very fast Marine pushes. I can immediately cross things off like very scary tank pushes, because hell, the factory's right there. And what I'm left with tends to be a lot of Banshee builds. or just a lot of things that involve a starport. Fast Raven, but even then, doesn't quite feel so good. But then, of course, when I pop in here and I see this tech lab going down, this to me implies that there's going to be some kind of early pushing coming on. This generally would indicate that to me. But I again want to illustrate the essential difference between what is likely to be happening versus what he can't be doing. It's generally a little more likely when someone gets a tech lab this fast on their barracks after going for a starport that they will be building more barracks and pushing with one base. As we see, that's not what Puma is doing. Puma is early expanding. If I scout this with the probe and see the tech lab, I can't say to myself, aha, I cross off the early expand. Because there's no reason he can't just get a tech lab and build a command center. This moment in the gameplay, I think, is the potential for the biggest mistake that players will make, is where they just suddenly go, uh-oh, yeah, he must be one-basing it. He must be building a whole bunch of stuff. I better respond quickly by getting a lot of gateway units. So, as we see, there is the combat shield going down. I'm actually going to remove this production tab so I can think about this a little bit more clearly. This was just some good defense by Puma. And of course, the Phoenix to me makes tons of sense. If our opponent brought in a factory, I mean, I'm almost certain that he's not going to be going for some sort of marine build. I'm almost certain he's not going to be going for some sort of tank build. The Phoenix is the most reasonable choice because he's probably having some Banshees up. He, at the very least, will have a starport up. And if he's going for Viking, I can always kind of run away. So MC now just scouts and gets perfect information. He sees the expand, he sees the barracks, he sees the tech lab add-on. I think this is a very wise move from Puma, or from MC. He's actually not building any ground units, but he is building a Phoenix nonstop. Now here's a really interesting moment for me as I'm looking at this from just the Protoss point of view. At this phase in the game, what have you seen? Tech lab on barracks, indicator that upgrades for Marines are coming or Marauders. Factory in base, indicator that we're going to have some air units coming in. This second gateway, when was this built? I'm real curious about this second gateway. I'm pretty sure he gets it after he gets his Stargate. He must, given the timing of it. And then here is the Stargate. And then he gets, okay, so he gets the second gateway before he actually scouts here. So this to me just makes sense because you're just not going to have that much information. And if all of a sudden we see that there's like 3 barracks in here, you're dead unless you have 2 gateways. This is something that a lot of Protosses will do in all matchups. They'll overproduce gateways because they just don't know what their opponent is doing yet, and they have to account for possibilities. But I think that this is a cool moment when this Phoenix steps in. See, we're going to see the warp gates finish. So here's the warp in. Nothing yet. And then the Phoenix gets in, sees exactly what we're up against, and doesn't build any more gateway units. Look at these gateways. Just not doing anything. Doing nothing. Expanding. Doing nothing. Doing nothing. In production, yeah, lots of Phoenixes for harassment, for all that good jazz. Nothing out of these 2 gateways. That, to me, is a very cool lesson that we just learned. We see MC, wow, look at this. Getting a Forge. Still no gateway units. Looks like he is chrono boosting largely the Phoenixes out, but we see non-stop probe production. I guess I should finish that non-stop probe production with a, for the most part, another Phoenix incoming. Yeah, there's the probes. Essentially non-stop. So, let me talk a little bit more about the half and half analysis ideology. So again, to reiterate this for the 1000th time, we blast through it once, then do it slow from Protoss point of view, slow from Terran point of view to learn as much as we can. And the most important thing about the first part of a half and half is that we make certain that we have questions in our head. All this not production of gateway units, all this delay that we saw MC doing, I would not want to be that focused about in my first analysis. In my first run-through, where I'm just asking for the big, broad questions. These are details that I really want to make sure I can soak up on a zoom-in all as they relate back to the idea of, well, when are we going to be attacking with these, when we open up with this Phoenix play? What's our next step, and when are we going to be attacking? Well, it looks like MC's next step is just to get some big upgrades there, but I don't think an attack is actually planned for a very, very long time. MC's doing this usual harassment. I don't really care about this. I just lost my train of thought so hard. Yeah, that's very useful to say. Alright, let's try it one more time. This is obvious. It's not that this is Alright, this is obvious. Everyone knows that if you get Phoenixes, you should poke and prod and look at them and try to check out what's going on. This is fine. I mean, there's nothing that noteworthy about this, but going for the fast upgrade, we still only see the 3 barracks there, and we're getting a good sense that there's a lot more Marines in here. And if he does move out to do a push, we have the assurance that we can pin him back a little longer with these Phoenixes. So at this point, I guess it makes sense with the gateways. I'm feeling pretty comfortable at this point saying to myself, we should only be focusing on gateways right now because he does have the big 3 barracks up. He does have the medevacs being produced. What I want to do, though, is do one of my favorite exercises that we always end up doing, which is where we pause and we ask ourselves about how many units our opponent has. How many units does Terran have? I'm even going to remove this. We did this a lot in the previous daily with unit counting, but it's kind of funny how often when we stop in a half and half, we don't actually have any clue about how much he has. Well, I guess he went for air and then backed up and got 3 gateways after an expansion. Excuse me, 3 barracks after he got an expansion. So how much does he have? Well, I guess he's going to have both the upgrades. I'm guessing that since... This is one of these moments where it makes you start to realize how important it is to know something like, when does an expansion normally finish? If he goes for fast starport, when does his barracks normally get done? So I'm going to guess... I'm actually going to take it from the chat because I don't actually have a good sense, to be entirely honest. So... Yeah, 20 Marines, 3 Marauders, 2 medevacs. I'm going to ignore the Vikings. 24 Marines, 23 Marines is some numbers I'm getting. 15 Marines, 18 Marines, 5 Marines. We also have 8 Marauders, 3 Marauders. The Marauders, what's really varying. People are saying 1 to 2 medevacs, which seems pretty good. But yeah, wow, there's a lot of 3 Marauders, 8 Marauders, 4 Marauders, 5 Marauders. Let's actually jump in and see exactly what was there and see if we can explain it. Now, honestly, when we go and actually count the amount of units that he has, we can probably calculate it strictly. It's a little easier to calculate with Protoss because it's like a warp in every 30-ish seconds. But with Terran, I want to try to be able to explain it in an abstract way, maybe see if that'll help me. So as we come here, we see that it's 5 Marauders, 14 Marines, 2 medevacs. It's actually fewer Marines than I would have thought, and maybe about as many Marauders as I would have thought. We said 3 Marauders to 8 Marauders. And I guess this does make sense. I mean, if he's getting his barracks up so fast, or so late, the one thing he's really struggling on is add-ons. So the fact that his army is going to be quite small, I guess, makes sense to me. I mean, this is not actually that many units. Most 2 barracks builds have that by, like, 7 minutes or so. 7 to 8 minutes. And the fact that we're at 10, yeah. But, I'm especially interested in that very, very low Marine count. And I think I have to attribute it to this, him snagging this second tech lab. I don't know. I'm actually going to come back. So I guess that's actually a better explanation. The fact that he got this tech lab so early meant that he was either making Marauders or making Marines. Okay, yeah, okay. Now I have a better way to state it. Alright, I'm going to speed up to this point. Okay, so we had this tech lab up early. We had this reactor up for a little while. And this last tech lab came up so late that there's not even that much of a reason that it would influence this number. So here's one of these either-or situations that we're going to end up in. This is going to be a strong ore, okay? If he gets a tech lab up really early on one barracks, he can either make Marines or Marauders out of it. Sounds like a very obvious statement, but think about that a little bit more strongly. He can either make a lot of Marines to be able to deal with our Phoenixes, which means his overall army size is going to be a lot weaker. A Marine, if we come back to the game, we can see that a Marine takes 25 seconds to build, a Marauder takes 30 seconds. They're basically the same amount of time. If he's making a lot of Marines out of that tech lab barracks, he's really not getting that big of an army size in the early game. If you're making Marauders out of barracks, then you're spending a lot of money for each cycle of production. So I guess in my eyes, these Phoenixes did the interesting side effect of having him make more Marines than he wanted to early, which really hurt his army size. If he had a reactor up early and he was making a lot of Marines out of them, this would not hurt his army size at all because he's making full use of this reactor. But the fact that he got this tech lab up early, he's not really making full use of the tech lab by building Marauders. Kind of an interesting spot. So that means that either he's going to have a decent amount of Marauders, like maybe 8 to 10, or he's going to have, I guess I'd say more Marines than usual, but still not that many Marines, because again, it's a tech lab. He's producing them one at a time. So amazingly, what I have learned in a very broad general sense, in a very, whoa, holy 8-speed Batman. In a broad general sense, if I go air and am forcing him to make Marines out of a tech lab, his army's going to be quite small. His army's going to be a lot smaller than I think. So I'm more than okay sneaking in a forge. I don't have to build these extra gateways that early. Because what if he did make the Marauders, then my Phoenixes are going to rip him to shreds. That was pretty neat. That was pretty neat. I thoroughly enjoyed that. What marvelous little play we're seeing from MC. Isn't this great? Isn't he just the man? And then at this point, I'm still asking myself, when does MC attack? When is the attack coming? What is the next step? I don't feel like there's any reason to attack until way after we take a third. Zealot leg speed coming up. This is just a good upgrade to have. Excuse me. A lot of good upgrades to have here. Very standard stuff, but Phoenixes are very odd. And in my eyes, this sort of harassment, again, everyone's going to do this. And I don't necessarily think we're actually getting that much additional noteworthy information. This is something that surprises me a little bit, though. This Templar Archives. We generally see MC going for 6 gateways and then expanding and then trying to do some sort of techie stuff, but again, we're seeing this don't build out of your gateways yet. I have enough units type of thing. And I wonder if this was a mistake by MC. I mean, look at this great pick here by Puma. So this is a clear mistake moment that we're seeing. So I'm actually just going to bounce back and see if there's any way that we could have avoided having this happen. So here's the push that did its usual thing. Here's the swing around by the Phoenixes. Do we even want to have this area undefended by the Phoenixes? I mean, he's swinging around from this side, but I feel like it's really important to cut back down. This seems really risky. If we got these Phoenixes up, why not try to make certain that they can cover this backside? Because this sort of thing seems weak to me. Phoenixes being all the way to the right side. I mean, if a Phoenix is nearby the front, it just can't harass at all. And it cleaned it up decently well. In the unit loss tab, we see that Puma's kind of in pain zone. But I'm surprised that Puma isn't trying to push up this way from under this side enough, because this is where most of the buildings are going to be. But I think that in a fundamental build sense, this is reasonably smart, this Templar Archives, because if you do get Storm up or Archons up, they're going to obliterate Marines. So if you see a decent amount of Marines up there, I think it's safe to just get Storm early. Does that statement sit well with me? I guess. I still feel like oGsMC is going to be playing a little bit defensively from this point in time. he's really not getting that much information that I like. If we click on these units, the fact that they are behind on upgrades, well, that's another useful thing to say. If we see that he doesn't have any upgrades, that to me would indicate that he was favoring building more barracks, that he was getting a Ghost Academy earlier on. So I would say he probably has the 5 barracks up right now. Yep, there's the 5 barracks, there's the Ghost Academy. We see, yep, the pretty late engineering bay. I like to do this scouting with whatever he's bringing at me, and with Terran, upgrades are such an important part that if you can look and check and see upgrades at certain points of time, you can make big, wild judgments. If you see a pretty early stim from Terran, he's just not going to have drops so early. Or if you see an early stim and combat shield, then man, you are not going to see starports for a long time. But, you know, if you're seeing, like, upgrades pretty early and medevacs, you can say, well, I guess his army size isn't so big. So I'm going to try to work on this, making more conclusions for the remainder of the game about what our opponent has based on what we've seen.
Research complete.
I'm a little surprised to see MC not expanding, making this extra round of units. This third feels a little bit late for me. I think that he can get away with saying, you know, if my opponent, I think, is making mainly Marine Marauder medevac and is not getting Ghost very soon, that I can just play defensively and all's well. And hell, we didn't really see any upgrades coming up, so seems all kosher and dandy and good to me. Coming back to the MC cam. What is MCC? Yeah, this is, I think, the most interesting moment in the game. When he steps into his opponent's base, and what does he see? 3 reactors. 3 freaking reactors. That is a lot. And I genuinely wonder if at this point in the game, actually... Ooh, you know what? Okay, so here's my thought on this. If he has just 5 barracks, then we know he's going to have a pretty typically sized army. So any of our good at defending normal stuff builds is underway, then we don't really need to change it that much. Big Zealot Archon pushes, hold off usual Marine Marauder amounts. Big Stalker Colossus forces, hold off normal Marine Marauder counts. That's fine. The one thing that I'm thinking of is that our opponent doesn't really have a reactor on this starport, but has these reactors on the barracks. I'm kind of hunkering to do a transition either to get Storm or to get those Colossi up. That seems pretty good to me. The Colossi are probably a big one, but the Storm is a nice stepping stone there. This engagement just works out really freaking nicely for Protoss. Just like so unbelievably nicely. But as we get to these small numbers, I guess I'm going to be a little bit more leery of trying to pop into something like... Colossus too quickly. I really feel like Storm is going to be very, very helpful here. I really feel... Okay, so he is getting Storm, but I want to have my eye on Colossus really soon here, because we basically have almost all the pieces that we need to this build, except we might need something a little bit better against the obvious Ghost Marine mix, and Colossus are the best units against Ghosts and Marines by a huge long shot. And this, I think, was one of the huge mistakes of the game. This attack is just nonsense to me. I had this question beforehand, and as I'm rewatching it from MC's point of view, there was no trigger. There was nothing at all that MC really saw here to make him want to do this. I mean, what the heck? I mean, like, what the heck? This is... yeah, actually, I hate that. I mean, even if we rewind 15 minutes, or to 15 minutes, this is the only reasonable thing that he's seeing, which is a push he had to run away from, implying his opponent has an army that's probably a little bit bigger than his. So I really feel like this moment is probably my key misstep moment of the game, if I had to pick one. I think that MC could have safely and smartly gone for Colossus Tech earlier on. See, now he's getting it. He's seen a third, he sees a big Marine presence. I mean, he's getting dropped in the back, but that's fine. That ends up just pulling his opponent back. And I think that MC should be in, like, non-stop unit production mode. This fourth seemed a little sloppy. Oh, gosh, you know, yeah, like... as I'm rewatching this through, I'm just feeling more and more like that's the big key point of just total pain and devastation for me. Now the Phoenix is doing the spotting at the front. Seems to make sense to me. This is repositioning our army in a place we don't really want to. And in this final engagement, MC may have even been able to control this just fine. He may have been able to. I'm starting to just realize, though, that out of this build, this very fast Phoenix opening gives us the opportunity to get the scouting we need to not only get away with a lot, but also to do something like build, or forces our opponent to make more Marines early on, which weakens his later pushes. Which means we can actually power a lot harder with Phoenixes, not just because of what we see, but because of what he is forced to make. How did MC lose this final battle? This blows my mind. How did this happen? Was everything completely and totally clustered up? Yeah, yes it was. Oh, man. Well, that also really sucks, and you don't want to have that happen, like, basically ever. And then the Templar were there at the top side and didn't do anything! So we could have won that battle, right? There you go. Could have won that battle. That was painful to watch. But I still feel like if I was in this situation, I still would have made the adjusted change of getting these Colossi out a lot earlier. Because when this push happens, if we just have... I mean, look at this. This is 40 seconds too late. 40 seconds too late is all it took. If we just got this robo, or geared up to get it once we saw these, these 3 reactors down, we could have gotten ourselves 4 Colossi with range for this push, comfortably ripping apart ghosts and all that good fancy jazz. What I'm not going to try to say from this replay is, oh, MC just lost because, you know what, he just sucks with his control and he just messed up. You know, I honestly think he probably could have won that final battle, but it's still kind of telling that he desperately needed to win that final battle. Otherwise, he had nothing left to fall back on. You don't really want to be in that position ever, where it all comes down to you having to do something absolutely pristinely perfectly, because there's going to be times where things are a little clumped. And no good strategy has, like, a period where the stars have to align so perfectly just to stay even. That just feels flawed. So I feel like in this first run through, what I really learned is the way the Phoenixes can exploit these Marines, or exploit the unit counts early on for our opponent. I learned that the Phoenix positioning can oftentimes lead us into some grody situations, where if we're too far north, he can do the drops in front. I also learned how much powering we can get done, and the logic of MC's build was really solid. It appears where he's like, yeah, I'm just going to completely stop building. I'm going to completely halt all production here because I'm totally safe. And then you look, and yes, in fact, indeed, just by virtue of what our opponent did, getting that fast starport, there's really not that much he could do. So, we're going to go on to part 3. We're going to look at it from Puma's point of view. I'm going to wrap up the daily. And then I'm going to be casting the After Hours Gaming League. So whatever you do, don't go anywhere. It's time to part 3. Time to go to part 3 with me.